the Silver Screen Project.
Welcome to the Silver Screen Project, where we look back at a series of films in anticipation of an exciting new cinema release.
In preparation for A Haunting in Venice, we went back and watched Murder on the Orient Express. We watched Death on the Nile, and now we've just watched the brand new Kenneth Branagh Poirot film, A Haunting in Venice.
Yes, we have.
What did you think of it?
I thought it was good. I'm a little bit scared still. No, I'm not. I'm a little bit. When we were on the way there, we were like, how scary is it going to be? And like, I was like, from the little teaser I saw, it was a little bit scary. And it was a little bit scary.
It was a little spooky.
It was definitely a different tone to the others, which I really appreciated. Because I think the first two are quite similar in tone. So when the second one kind of tries to replicate it a little bit, it's not quite as successful.
I'd say the second one is like camper.
Yeah, but I mean, it's a similar tone in, generally speaking, whereas this one's like, we're just going to go in a completely different direction.
Yeah.
And when it does become, we're going to spoiler free for a first few minutes here, for anyone who's accidentally started listening to us here and is on the way to see the film in the cinema. When it does turn into the kind of murder mystery, it's still kind of interspersed with these kind of more horror tinged moments.
Yeah.
And I think some of them, they work well. Like, they're not the most horrifying thing I've ever seen, but there's a good little bit of tension and good little kind of jump scares to some degree, but not like cheap ones, I wouldn't say. It's not like a ghoul suddenly running and going, or whatever. Yeah. Or there are moments there are surprising moments. But yes, I thought it was good. How did you find it?
Yeah, I thought it was really good. It was definitely better than Death on the Nile.
Yeah, I would say so.
Which I said about last time, not a huge fan of. And probably arguably as good or better than Murder on the Orient Express.
I would say, I was trying to think. I was going to say,
it's hard when you've just come out.
I know. I was going to say it's probably top two, but that's not really much in a trilogy, is it? No.
I think you mentioned kind of the spooky. I think he did a really good job of like balancing the spookiness whilst keeping it a murder mystery Poirot thing.
Yeah, and we won't go into the plot details later, but they make it fit within the world.
Yeah. And it makes sense.
It makes sense what's going on, or does it? I think there's we spoke about it afterwards. There's certain little elements where you kind of go, okay, but it could all go one way or the other. I would say,
like you don't leave the cinema being like, well, that didn't make sense.
Yeah, it's still a murder mystery, and there's still, even though actually at the start it doesn't seem like it's a murder mystery necessarily, but it becomes clear that it is, and then maybe there's more murders along the way, and it definitely becomes a murder mystery, and those kind of elements are solved pretty successfully.
Yeah,
I wouldn't say, like, it's hard to tell coming straight out of it, like you say. I felt some of it was a bit like, okay, like it wasn't super satisfying for me personally. It made sense, everything, and I could see the clues, and along the way I kind of like, oh yeah. But
I think
it was good.
The spookiness added to the mystery, because
I
think, well, for me
it makes
anyway,
you kind of second guess certain things, and
because you're kind of on the edge of your seat because the spooky stuff's happened, you're kind of more focusing on the spookiness than trying to figure out the story or the plot, or at least I was.
Which is kind of what's happening to Poirot as well, isn't it? He's kind of he's shaken. I like that, like, because it's 10 years after the previous one, so this is set in 1947. The last one was 1937, and I like that he's retired again almost. He seems to always kind of have a break in between. He's fully retired. He's kind of a bit depressed. He's in a bit of a kind of sad cycle, and at the start of this, he is kind of off his game a little bit, and he gets shaken as it goes through. And around the middle, he's kind of like, am I even cut out for this? I was thinking, is it because he's old? And there are elements that are explained with that. Yeah. It's quite clever, the whole thing. And it is, I think, compared to the last one, I think the clues are there much more in this one.
Yeah, and it is one that you, when it kind of gets resolved, you're like, oh yeah, that makes sense, because we saw this and that earlier in the film. Yeah. Unlike the last one, where it was like, oh, we've solved this because we found all this stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I don't know how much more we can say before we get into spoilers.
No, I think the cast were good.
We can talk about the cast a bit in non-spoilers.
Kind of as star-studded as the first one.
No, I think, although they say at one point there's 12, because it's based around a seance at the start, and Michelle Yeoh plays a medium, and there's a whole cast of characters. They say 12 seats, so I imagine I think
there was like 10 of them, though. I think they just grabbed some extra seats.
There was
a couple of empty seats.
Right, okay, for the ghosts. But it's that kind of thing where that's probably a similar number to the other ones, but it feels, it's less star-studded, like you say.
Yeah, but like everyone in it was, like, Kenneth Branagh
very good.
Great as Poirot again.
And he gets to do some of the more kind of. So we said last episode he did some more emotional acting when he's thinking about his past.
Yeah.
He has some elements of that in this, but there's also him being kind of befuddled and scared, which we haven't really seen in the other ones at all.
Yeah, I thought Jamie Dornan was really good as playing a complex character who shifts moods quite a lot in the film.
Yes,
and he really believes.
And you find out what his past is, and we won't go into it yet. But he's got some kind of trauma that's quite apparent, and his son is in it as well. I realised after looking at the cast list, his son and him are both in Belfast, which was directed by Kenneth Branagh. So that's probably where they got their connections there. The son's quite good. He's a child actor. He's not particularly offensive.
Quite fun.
Creepy kind of kid, but not like offensively creepy where he's like lurking around, but more, when a kid's like slightly too grown up for their own good, and you're like something's happened to this kid in the past.
I think Kelly Riley was really good as well as Rowena Drake, the kind of host of.
She's like an opera or an ex-opera singer who's kind of brought them all together. Yeah, very good. She has some nice range throughout the film as well, which
and again
we'll talk
is good at showing the trauma that character would have experienced.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, Michelle Yeoh again has some good range in this as well. We see from kind of, I won't tell too much, but we see her from going very serious to kind of scared and kind of affected by what's going on.
I thought there was a right amount of usage of Tina Fey as well, because she's such a recognisable face as well.
Yeah.
It could easily distract, especially because she's got like an American accent in this. She uses pretty much a normal accent.
Yeah, slightly more kind of 1940s vibe of her, but I thought that it was quite like, it worked for the period piece kind of thing. She's got that kind of slightly like old Hollywood kind of vibe about her, which was quite
and it's like there's a right enough amount in there that she didn't get too distracting, but she was still entertaining enough when she was on screen.
And there's Jude Hill, who I recognise, but I think he looks like other people. So he played Maxine, who was the fiance.
No, Jude Hill was
not
the
Jude
kid.
Hill. What have I written down there?
Kyle Allen.
I've written down Jude Hill twice on here. Kyle Allen, yes, I've seen him in other things before, but he also looks like who's the guy, Josh Hartnett, he looks a little bit like, who was in Oppenheimer recently, and I think, was he also in Black Mirror with Aaron Paul?
Yes,
I think, or maybe that was Kyle Allen, but do you know what I mean? It's that he's not the most unique looking, but he was pretty good. He didn't have masses to do with his role.
And
I wouldn't
even
say.
kind of like, so Camille Cotton plays Olga Smirnoff. Didn't have much to do, but
no, she does a good job.
And then
of it,
I enjoyed Ricardo Scamaccio as well as the bodyguard.
I've seen him in stuff before. I'm sure he's in a John Wick, isn't he? He might be in the one that's in.
But he didn't have what to do. But he was fun.
Yeah, especially at the start when he's playing the bodyguard of Poirot, who he's hired to keep would-be kind of mystery givers away from him. The bit where he's throwing people in the canals and stuff is quite a fun little comedic bit at the start. Yeah.
But everyone was pretty good. But
everyone was pretty good.
We will go into spoilers now.
That's a decent amount of non-spoilers for you there. So it's pretty horror-y at times, isn't it? This film?
There was a couple of bits that made me jump because it was the classic the bit that really got me. I fucking knew the moment he like slowly looked up to a mirror. I was like, "There's gonna be a bloody scary girl in that mirror." And there's
a scary girl in the mirror. And and then when you look around, she wasn't there.
Yeah.
And the fun thing about the horror elements is, first of all, the camera work's really good. We've spoken about the cinematography before. They do some good mix of first person and the effect where it's almost they're on a rig, so it's keeping steady with the person running, jolting around. But the other fun thing is that it gets explained as part of the plot, all the supernatural stuff.
Yes.
So it is part of the...
As it was kind of progressing, like, I always found these films are fundamentally grounded in reality.
Yeah.
And I was like, if they make this paranormal, it'll really kind of lose me.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of glad it was like, oh, actually, we've got explanations that make sense for all this spooky stuff.
Yeah. And the whole honey thing is something that is dropped throughout the film. And even the fact that, like, when they find the honey to use in the tea, it's whether that for Poirot was intentional or not, but the fact that it was hidden away in a cupboard, so it hadn't been used for like the year, it kind of, there's all these little signs and you're like, what's going on? And when Carl Allen tastes the honey and he's like, it's not wildflower honey. There's all these little references.
That's what I with all these clues, and it does kind of revisit them at the end to kind of explain it, and you're like, that bit, and,
exactly,
and that bit, and that
it makes
bit.
you feel like you're kind of on board with it, whereas a bad murder mystery doesn't do those kind of those pointing out moments. Although we did speak afterwards, there is the element of when, even though Poirot is still on the drugs at the end, when you see the kind of ghost pull her off the end, I feel like if you were the kind of person who wanted to believe there was some element to it, that's the kind of thing. And even the ghost in the water kind of pulling her back down into the water. There's those elements that kind of keep it slightly, the door open a hinge kind of, a smidgen kind of thing. Yeah. But I think that, it is a grounded universe, like you say.
Yeah, that you could also equally believe that because he's still on the honey, he suddenly looked there, which made her jump. And slip and fall as well.
Yeah.
I think the deaths in this are entertaining as well. Yeah. So like Michelle Yeoh's death, we see it wonderfully shot with just the wall with the silhouettes and her falling.
Yeah,
great shot, and it's brutal. And it's a really like jaw dropper moment because it comes out of nowhere. Yeah, because you've just had the attempt on Poirot.
Yeah,
and it kind of settles down after that. You think, oh, that's the big thing, and then bam.
Yeah. And also, it's kind of like foreshadowed a little bit where at the party there's the girl like crying up the top there, and I think it's because she went up there and she got scared of the heights, but then that is where, so we know there's this balcony right up above the statue there, and it's kind of it, and even the host knows it because she went up to comfort the girl, so it's kind of like, again, all the clues are kind of there to some degree.
So I also I liked in the start when he's kind of running past loads of people wanting to solve stuff.
Yeah.
Like Guthrum was like, "Oh, my brother got murdered like a year ago."
Yeah.
I was kind of thinking like, that's a long time ago for something to happen. Yeah. But then in this, he solves a murder that happened.
A year-old murder.
I was like, oh yeah, that's cool. And then the other death, Jamie Dornan's death.
Yes, where it's revealed that he was basically forced to do it over the phone.
And everyone who watched that film, the moment that door was locked and he was locked in a room by himself, it was like, he's going to die.
Yeah.
And I love that it wasn't, a secret alleyway or someone a ghost.
Because we see the two kind of spooky mannequins in there. No one checks them. I was kind of like, God, it's like obviously a new person in there.
And the camera like focuses on that mannequin quite a bit to make you think that's that. But then when it's revealed, I'm like, oh yeah, no, that makes sense.
But in a way, it was the mannequin because the knife was part of the display there. So it kind of, I really like at the start of when the seance first starts and we're kind of like on edge. There's the typewriter and everything, and Poirot within like a few minutes is like, oh no, hang on, there's something going on here. Turns the lights on, second assistant, all that. That's very good, and it's just. And then from beyond there, it gets even scarier and she's having her whole thing. And that's what I was saying with Michelle Yeoh. She goes from super serious to having her kind of, psychic trance thing, which is very, intense and scary. Yeah. Then she's appearing shaken after. And then when she kind of says bye to Poirot, she's got this kind of smarminess. And you're kind of like, which is the real her kind of thing? Yeah. We find out from the clues later that the one at the end where she was done and she thought she was getting paid was the real her kind of thing. But
I enjoyed as well... when Poirot was interviewing her two assistants, but like they were like, "Can we do it together?" Like, no, and the interviews are cut together of him asking the same questions to both of them to get them to both tell the truth by accident. And I was like, that was fun.
And also, it seemed like they did have different opinions of her to some degree. And part of that, the sister says that the madam used to flirt with the brother all the time. So he obviously believed her a little bit more, and he did seem like he knew there was tricks and he was part of them, but he thought there was something going on. Whereas the daughter was, the sister was just like, nah, this is all bullshit. Because they were like hustlers, weren't they? They said they were thieves and they'd had experiences in the war. Speaking of Jamie Dornan's past, turned out to be
concentration camp
liberation, which is completely explains his
PTSD.
Basically.
What was I going to say about the siblings? I can't remember.
They had a happy ending, didn't they? So
I like the bit at the end where it was like there was still kind of one unsolved mystery with who did the blackmail that kind of set a lot of this in motion.
Yeah,
and it was like Poirot was like, oh yeah, I know it was the kid. The kid
it's not a big deal. I'm not going to get this kid in trouble. He didn't. He was just doing his best. Yeah.
It was nice that nobody was a suspect because they were embezzling funds for the first time.
Yes. Yeah. Well, they mentioned it about the skimming from the madam's thing, and then it was like, no, that wasn't happening. So,
it was like, cool. That's not a reason
that's
for
the first. Yeah.
I said as well when the film finished, I find it funny that in none of these films the murderer's been arrested.
No, it never ever happens.
He let them go, and then one committed suicide and one fell off a balcony.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
One thing that I thought was really good as well that added to the tension and the kind of the scariness was the lack of score.
Okay,
where it just, for a lot of scenes, it's just deadly silent, and then you can just hear like the children singing, and like it really just, when the music over, it kind of distracts you because it's silent, and then the children.
It was. I thought the use of score was really interesting because it was quite minimal. But I was looking at it afterwards, and it was Hilda Gonadorter, who I recognise the name in the credits. She did the score for Joker, so that kind of I don't know if it's violin. I think it's like cello. I think it might be. And in Joker, it's very prominent. It's the kind of eerie, like long thing. And there's certain elements of that, and it's much more subtle in this. I'm not sure how much of a score she actually did, but it's a kind of recognisable, kind of haunting kind of vibe.
But it's kind of an art in itself in like not just knowing what music to do, but also when not to use music at all.
Yeah.
Another thing I thought was the constant question on what's real and what's supernatural was really fun for a while.
It was very well done.
And you kind of like, because the whole point of the start is like, oh, we want to figure out how this seance is doing it.
Yes.
And then she dies, and you spend the rest of the film trying to figure out how all this spooky stuff's happening.
Exactly. And most of it's like, she couldn't be doing this now, and it does that. Most of it is related to the honey. Some of it is little tricks, because Tina Fey and the bodyguard were in league to kind of set up the scene, but not anything to do with the murders. I like the connection that he had with he was the policeman on the scene.
Yeah.
It's very, very Poirot, very Agatha Christie, isn't it? Like a year later, the same policeman came back, kind of thing.
It was fun as well, because we'd seen kind of that scene multiple times of her being pulled out the river, and then we see it one last time, and he turns around and it's him.
It was nice to see, well, not nice, obviously a girl died, but it was
she didn't really die, Sam. It was a film.
No, I know, but it was good to see that she was already dead when she fell in the river, because I was thinking, even if she wanted to drown herself, it didn't show her like striking on the rocks or whatever, so it was kind of like she just fell out the window, and then when they pulled her out she was dead, but turned out she was dead already, which explained a lot.
I thought it was going to be that she took too much honey and that made her lose her mind and jump off.
Yes, that's what I thought, but it was even more simple than that, and that's why the mum was so kind of involved in it, because she literally had to cover her tracks. I
really, because for a lot of it there was like, I'm not sure what's up with this woman. I think there's something else, but I never really suspected her killing her own daughter.
Well, she was very good in that it was only really when she was accused and it was revealed that she let the mask slip, as they mostly do in these films. But I didn't really suspect her of anything. But we spoke about on the way out of the cinema that when the fiance was kind of cleared of anything, and it was kind of like he was actually okay. Yeah. Like, he did love her, but he also wanted the money, but he also didn't want to be involved. He never knew that he was going to be the most important person in her life. And he was like, that kind of almost broke his heart as much as the lack of money.
It really kind of added, we kind of mentioned that, like, when you find out that he's not actually a bad guy, your eyes do turn towards the
exactly. And I hadn't really thought of that, but it does make a lot of sense there. Yeah. I don't have masses of I've got a couple of little negatives, but
I don't really have anything.
I just had the thing that kind of came to mind when I was having a quick look over the summary. I'm sure it could be explained by in-world things, but Michelle Yeoh's character does quite convincingly throw her voice and mimic the girl. Yeah, I imagine that's just one of her parlor tricks there.
Yeah, people can do that.
It's the kind of thing where I thought Poirot would be like, that could have been explained or whatever, and they don't really address it because maybe it would have been slightly too much of a reach for people to believe it. We spoke afterwards about how the fact that the kid could like hear the voices as well as anyone else seemed to imply that maybe he was on the honey as well, but that was never said. So
the kid's just
he was just a bit messed up.
He was reading Edgar Allan Poe and he was like 11.
Yeah, exactly. And I did also think this is not really a bad thing against the film. Maybe a little bit towards the writing. I did think that the kid was going to be a lot younger, the girl, and then they mentioned that she had a fiance and they started showing her, and I was like, oh, she was like 25.
I think it was kind of like, so I was wondering about that, like her age, because
there's the Halloween party with the orphans at the start, which we didn't mention, but it's a fun little kind of thematic bit of old school 1940s Halloween.
But I think it was almost kind of an intentional thing with the whole, like,
because
they
all the
talk
kids
about
we
her.
see are like 10. And then,
I think with the thinking that the daughter was a lot younger than she was, is because the mother saw her that way and tried to make her that way.
Yes,
so you see it from her point of view.
Yeah, true.
And you're like, oh wait, no, she's actually a grown woman that her mum's made into a child again. Another thing we forgot to mention, the basement scene was fun.
That was cool.
I mean, it was sad, but it's like, oh, kids did actually die in here.
And the puppet show that explains that earlier on, that was very what is it, Deathly Hallows? There's the kind of similar cutout animation style thing, but in this it looks very practical, whether it is or not, but it looks like something that they were actually doing there. There was a weird person in the mask doing like the spooky story. I guess that was just a member of like the orphanage staff or something. And I was like, I thought this was going to be someone scary or something. I was kind of expecting, when everyone was turning up and when the fiance turned up, I was kind of expecting like one more recognizable face to turn up. I think that kind of speaks more to the lack of like super well-known people in this. But it didn't really harm the film.
I feel, although Tina Fey kind of feel that although she was already also part of a plot, it did miss like Book a bit. Because he's fun in the first two, and a bit, but like bit of a comic relief sidekick for Poirot, essentially.
I think they tried that with her, where she was kind of going like, oh, he's doing his thing and all that. And the fact that she'd written about him, and he was almost, the fake version of him was almost more famous than the real him. And what did they mention? Like do they say Norwegian detective? No, what did they say? When the housekeeper was being interviewed, she was like, oh, this is the so-and-so detective. So the version that she'd written about was obviously not from Belgium, but from somewhere else in Northern Europe kind of thing.
And she's like, oh, do you base yourself on her character?
There was some funny moments there. They weren't like, I liked Book more, like you say. And I think that part of this whole film was about him kind of resolving these ghosts of his past. And although Book wasn't mentioned in person at all, in name, they mentioned Catherine. I
think they do briefly mention Book at one point,
but they mentioned Catherine, who was the fiance from his distant past at this point. And I thought that was quite interesting. It was kind of it probably is the closing chapter for Poirot, I'd imagine.
Although like I wouldn't be against another one of these.
Well, we see him at the end. So another thing that's really fun actually is it's set over almost exactly 24 hours, isn't it? Because it starts with him starting his day and getting the pastries, and it ends, he's not slept seemingly. And I really like when he just takes that case and he just turns around and he's like classic Poirot, almost more classic than we've ever seen him. It's almost like he's back to element. David Suchet kind of just like, and so this is what's going to happen. So they could do more, and I would love for them to do more. Especially as the last one, as we said, didn't get us really much cinema release at all. I don't think.
I saw some people who saw this and didn't even realize there was two other films.
Well, good for them. They can watch them now. All on Disney Plus.
With like obviously you had the Adam Sandler murder mystery films, and then Knives Out. We're having a bit of a murder mystery resurgence. So it's the perfect time to do another Poirot film.
Absolutely, and maybe he'll be able to attract some of his other famous friends. Like Emma Thompson's probably not friends with them anymore, is he? Because they were quite publicly divorced, I think, weren't they? But some other kind of connections he's got. Chris Hemsworth, get him in from Thor.
Chris Hemsworth, get some of the Harry Potter crew in as well.
Oh, absolutely.
Gary Oldman.
Oh my God, can you imagine?
Oh no, they were never in the same film.
No, but he's the kind of if this does well, which it seems to be doing okay so
it's
far.
Getting good reviews.
I mean, it's only been out less than a week as we're seeing it now. When this episode comes out, maybe just around a week, depending on how quickly we can get it out. But I'm glad that it's doing well. I'm glad that it's good, and you got anything else to say?
No, but I've got a few bits of trivia. So the first one is Kenneth Branagh worked with the technical department to cause surprises for the cast. The actors were not warned about lights going out suddenly or gusts of wind and slamming doors on sets in which they worked, causing genuine confused and startled reactions from the actors to appear in the film.
That's good.
Kelly Riley confirmed that filming the seance scene was a terrifying experience. So in an interview, it scared the bejesus out of me.
Very good.
That's fun. It's always a good way to add extra emotion.
Real fear.
It's obviously the famous example with Die Hard, where they dropped Alan Rickman off quicker than they said he was going.
3, 2, 1, and they dropped him on 2 or something like that. You can see that in his face. It's good.
The second one I've got is Poirot suggests that Leo should read Dickens. In Murder of the Orient Express, Poirot is reading A Tale of Two Cities, and in Death on the Nile, he reads The Mystery of Edwin Drood.
Okay.
And Edwin Drood being Dickens's last book, which is an unfinished murder mystery. So it's like,
see if he can finish it.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, that's fun. And I like the fact that they kind of talk about how Dickens is kind of a bit sillier and more childish, but he loves reading Dickens anyway.
And that's more kind of, as you say, that's more the tone of the first ones originally in this series anyway.
And finally, in the book Halloween Party, in which this is based, Joyce Reynolds was murdered by being drowned in an apple barrel instead of being impaled on a statue. So they do reference that by Poirot nearly being murdered.
And I think that's quite clever that it was an accidental, almost killing kind of thing. And it was only when they realised they saw the back of his grey hair or whatever that they stopped kind of thing, even though it looked like they stopped because they thought he was dead kind of thing. But either way, I like that little
I did think for a second we said that it might be Poirot's dead.
Poirot's dead and someone else has to do it. I like his ghost that he's watching over it.
I'm glad they didn't go that way though.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can't go back from that, can you?
Yeah, exactly.
I like that when we were predicting it like a year ago, whenever it was, about what this one was going to be called, we looked up, I think we knew it was going to be in Venice, and we looked up and there's another story that's something in Venice called like The Lord in Venice or something, like The Prince in Venice.
Or it's something...
by the canal, something by the canals or something. And it's Halloween Party, which I don't know if it's originally set in Venice. Who knows?
No, it's originally set in rural England.
Right, okay.
Apparently it's one of Agatha Christie's worst books. I saw someone describe it as it was in the period where she was just trying to make lots of money and had a dedicated following.
I've heard they get kind of wild and kind of silly, which this is probably within that.
I saw someone on Reddit describe it as not in her top 30 books.
Fair enough.
So it's quite funny that they've kind of picked this, but I guess
I made it potentially in the top few of these films.
Yeah, I wonder if there'll be people who'll go out and read the book after this and like,
like it's inspired by it. It's not
like the first two films are the two most famous Christie novels. Like even if you haven't read them, everyone knows Death on the Nile and Murder on the Orient Express. So but I guess it's I mean, we've got loads more of these Agatha Christie stories to choose from.
Exactly.
So and if he can change them enough like this to make them fun, then you got a load we could do. So the final thing to ask is whether or not this lived up for the hype for you. Prod-yes or prod-no?
Yeah, this is absolutely a prod-yes. I've really enjoyed this. I can't really say much else. I just really enjoyed it. How about you?
Yeah, definite prod-yes. It was past the hype. It was better than I thought it was going to be. So I thoroughly enjoyed it. I'm glad, unlike the previous two, we got to see it in cinema as well.
Yeah, I think that really helps. I think a lot of these silver screens we do, it's generally a positive experience because the cinemas generally makes films better. But just being able to concentrate, see, like, especially with this kind of with the spooky vibes, it massively helps being in a big dark room.
We both jumped on occasion.
There's a bit at the start where a seagull got a pigeon. That scared me a little bit.
There was one bit, I can't remember what it was, but I was just like, fuck's sake.
Like, I don't want to scary.
And I was there's a certain bit where like a mirror breaks and something comes out of it, and my whole body shivered, just like in sync. And I was like, okay, that happened.
Well, that just happened.
But yeah, that is the Poirot trilogy, and it's a good one at that. So thank you for listening.
Yeah, if you want to check out more stuff like this, we've got the Project on the same podcast channel.
Thank you.
Bye. Ooh. Spooky bye. Halloween.